Hi, I'm Eric Ricker, Director of Friends of Morden Mine, and I'm joined now by Tom Paterson to talk about the significance of Morden in the modern day world and what it means. Morden is a 100-year-old site as of this year, and the structures behind us were actually constructed in 1913, so next year will be the 100th anniversary of these structures. Tom, why do you think we should conserve and develop this site?
It is the only surviving head frame tipple of the entire Vancouver Island coal mining industry, which lasted for 80 years and which was critical to the development of Vancouver Island's progress. The only other concrete head frame we know of is in the United States, in Illinois, and it is protected by legislation. And that's what we would very much like to see happen here.
Yeah. And the one in Illinois is in pristine condition. The people who've been responsible for it have looked after it over the years. Unfortunately, we can't quite say the same thing of Morden. Morden was made a park in 1972, thanks to the efforts, really, of a very prominent businessman named George Wilkinson. Mr. Wilkinson's father had been an inspector of mines in this area, and one day Mr. Wilkinson came by in the late 1960s to the Morden site and saw what had happened to it, namely it had been turned into a junkyard for a lumber company that had purchased the site. Alarmed by this, Mr. Wilkinson went to his friends in the government and offered to buy the site and donate it to the government as a park, but the government came through and purchased it itself for the princely sum of $10,000 at the time. Now, Mr. Wilkinson recognized right away that even in 1968 that this was the last evidence that we had of the coal mining era, and of course one of the reasons it is this last piece of evidence is it's built of concrete. Tom, tell us a little bit about the why concrete was used at this particular site when it wasn't used at others, and why that's got something to do with why we're interested in protecting it today.
As far as we can understand, the Morden Company, Pacific Coast Coal Mines, chose to use concrete. They'd already had a fire at their previous operation on the other side of the highway at South Wellington. And they had already experimented with concrete. If you go visit their abandoned coal mine over there, you will see a very large piece of concrete structure in the field there. So I think that was their test case for here. So, but anyway, they started digging here in 1912, but their timing was bad. They no sooner had the shaft down 600 feet than the so-called Great Strike came down. And the miners walked away and the mine flooded. So management, faced with this impasse, seems to have used it as a, how will I put it?
Opportunity.
Yeah, so they took that opportunity to go to concrete, and they built this head frame that stands behind us. And it's the only, as I say, the only one ever done of concrete on Vancouver Island. All the rest were of timber, all the rest have disappeared.
Now, with this elaborate structure, you'd think it would have been probably the mine to end all mines, but the reality is this mine didn't operate very long. What was the reason for that?
This mine actually had a very short life. By the time they got it functioning, we say the true operating years of 1921. They were in the development phase for a long time. The Great Strike I mentioned ended in 1914. It was about 1915-16 before they were actually shipping any coal, but their prime operative years were 1920-21, at which point they shut down. And it's ironic that this mine stands behind us because it was one of the shorter producers of all the island mines. They did try to reopen it in 1930-31, but again, at that time it was the Depression. I should say, besides the Great Strike, another impediment of the time was the First World War. So it was 1920 before they were really rolling. 1921, it was over. 1930, they tried again. 1931, it's over, finished.
Morden, of course, as you mentioned, was just one of many mines in the Nanaimo area, and it wasn't at all successful by comparison to some of the others. In the South Nanaimo area, just put Morden in context. What else was going on in this general area that?
Well, South Wellington is where we're standing here today. It was a major producer. The original, the precursor, the predecessor to this mine started at PCCM, which is the old Richardson-Fittick slope. Going back to 1880 period, you had the Dunsmuirs at South Wellington with the Alexandra mine. And then we had two major producers in South Wellington village. I'm referring to the village, which is only about 2 miles from here across the other side of the highway. The South Wellington number 5, that was 1917, 1932. And then its successor, the South Wellington number 10, which is 1937, 1952. They were major producers. This mine actually is the odd man out. And then south of us, just south of us, were the Granby operation, 1917, 1932. That was a major producer. This mine was a poor relative in that sense.
And of course at Granby, concrete was used and a model town site was developed, the evidence of which is still around to a certain extent. Say a little bit more about the Granby operation, because it's something that the visitor can get to fairly easily.
Granby is still available to people today. It's right just off the highway at Haslam Creek. You go underneath the E&N overpass and you're there, and you will see 2 concrete loading chutes in what looks like a gravel pit, but it's the old slack pile. And if you look at them closely, they're in excellent condition. It's rather a bitter pill for those of us who are trying to save Morden, that we're fighting a structure that has suffered greatly from the years of neglect and the weather, whereas the concrete just down the road, which was 1917 versus 1913, has held up much better. In other words, it was better concrete, better construction.